if VAT was 10% on hairdressing services, there would be more than a 10% increase in most people's salaries. Those people would have more spending power, we'd draw more people in the industry, we'd be able to afford to train more people, and that 10% increase in salaries would also be paying a huge amount back in tax.
And they got Eat Out to Help Out, so everyone got a tenner for going out to eat.
Yeah.
They had no safety. I was still having my staff work in visors and gloves and the clients sweating it out in plastic capes.
Yeah.
But the same people could then gone into the pub, had a burger and chips and sat at the same table laughing and joking.
I think it was an absolute boon time for those people.
So why was that the moment that our lobbying body wasn't screaming, no fucking way are you dropping us now?
I honestly think that hairdressers, barbers, beauticians, people that work in this industry care about people so much, and yet no one really looks out for them. And that's what really frustrates me.
Hi, welcome to the Noble Barber podcast. I'm Anthony Laban, and we'll be talking to various people in the industry who've made it and their journey and how they got here. Talking honest, cutting through the crap, and making sure your story and their story is heard to help your business and hopefully mine. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi there. Welcome to another edition of the Noble Barber podcast. I'm Anthony Laban, and I'm here today with Toby Dicker. Hello, mate.
Thanks very much for having me, but thanks for bringing me on.
Toby, I mean, amongst other things, we encountered each other through the Salon Employers Association, and this is an episode I've wanted to do. It's crept into many of the conversations, but about our lobbying, how we were treated pre, post, and during COVID, and how we are taxed to death as an industry.
Absolutely.
But let's start with a bit of a background of how you got to Salon Employers Association. What's your background prior to that?
Well, my background is starting in the hair industry in 1997, so I know I look way too young for that. But I met a woman called Amanda, and we got married, and we created a salon first, and then we got married, and then we've grew that over time to 5 sites around the UK. It's called The Chapel, and those businesses are in churches, chapels, beautiful interesting buildings like that. And we thought that would be our point of difference, as well as the way we charge. We charge by time, and then it was really elevating hairdressing and hairdressers to the level which we thought they deserved to be treated and respected. I've grown to really love the industry, and from there. Well, fast forward many years, got to COVID times, like everybody probably was ready to shut the doors on the first day of COVID. But, our teams kept us going, and the government helped, certainly, absolutely. And we had to borrow a lot of money to do that. And then at that point, there was a general sort of cry out for industry names to get involved in basically the COVID response. And the COVID response, I put my name forward and got invited onto a panel alongside other people. So it was literally just me on my own saying, I really care about this industry. Let's put some response in place. And initially that was all around the safety side of things.
Yep.
So it was around COVID safety, how to operate properly, and so on and so on. And somehow I sort of got dropped out of that group. And it sort of evolved into the industry's response for how we were funded during COVID, what we got in return, and mainly big organisations who have large amounts of funding were involved at that stage. So organisations like the NHBF and the British Beauty Council sort of grew out of that in response, and then started to become the voice of the industry. And they negotiated things for our industry at the time, and it was believed at the time that the best thing was to give bigger grants and so on to hairdressing businesses, because I think the voice was that not all were VAT registered. So it was a sort of a blanket approach, and you know what, everyone did the best thing they possibly could. In my opinion, we were lumped in with hospitality very early on. We were closed down in the same way as hospitality. And then what happened is that the Department for Business created a new group called the personal care sector. and that there became a group for the personal care sector, and that was the responding body.
So why do you think that happened? Because at that point we were almost identical to hospitality, and then we were taken out of hospitality just at the point that we needed to be open, and they got Eat Out to Help Out, so everyone got a tenner for going out to eat.
Yeah.
They had no safety. I was still having my staff work in visors and gloves, and the clients sweating it out in plastic capes.
Yeah.
But the same people could then gone into the pub, had a burger and chips, and sat at the same table laughing and joking.
But you missed one other thing. They got 5%.
And the VAT. So they dropped for over nearly 18 months, they dropped to 5% VAT, which with their reclaim presumably really made them VAT negative.
I think it was an absolute boon time for those people.
So everyone I know that had a bar was very, very happy. Now, why was that the moment that our lobbying body wasn't screaming, no fucking way are you dropping us now? Why were we not screaming at that point? Like, that's the first instance that it really irked me when I was wading through the shit of my company.
Yeah. Absolutely agreed. I mean, look, I had not started Salon Employers Association at that point.
But you must have looked back on it with a bigger magnifying glass than I have.
I'm not going to. I will be honest about the response. I wasn't involved in that point. We started. We sort of piggybacked on to Chop the VAT and so on, and we created Save Our Salons initially, and Save Our Salons was that sort of response. It came out of a WhatsApp group formed by a few London salon owners who were L'Oreal customers, and we thought, response to COVID, what are you doing about this? What are you doing about this? And asking each other questions. My very honest response to that is you have to look at the memberships of the organisations who are representing us at the table. And I believe that they respond in a way that is meaningful and so on for their memberships. And if I name them directly, I'll probably come up, but we've already talked about those organisations. They had a certain membership, and they thought that getting, rather than getting a VAT cut, because it wouldn't have necessarily helped a vast swathes of those memberships at all, because they weren't VAT registered, that a rates increase, there was a rebate that we got, would be a better thing. And in hindsight, that's my honest opinion. Their memberships would not have benefited as much from a VAT cut, unlike the rest of the industry. And we need to mobilise the industry now. But that's my honest opinion. I'm not going to...
So at this point, the decision was made that we parted ways with hospitality and got put in a special group, which we got very little from, to be fair. I mean, there were grants, but I mean, the way it seemed to work for me, we would open for 3 or 4 months, then we'd be shut down for 2 or 3 months, just in time for me to have a VAT bill.
Yeah.
So that I'd used all the money I had while we were trading, and then was left with a VAT bill I couldn't pay. I was given time to pay.
Yeah.
But by the time I was open, back to normal and trading, I'd probably had 3 VAT returns that I was playing catch up with.
Yeah.
Which were totaling kind of 80 odd thousand pounds.
Building up debt.
And the grants didn't really help, because the grants only helped me pay my rent and so on. Now, that was that. Time passed. I'm over it. It's okay. I'm onward. Salon Employers Association seemed to become more active post that.
Yeah, absolutely. We were pushing.
Was that a change of direction for them?
No. It was Save Our Salons, which was all about VAT cut, and it moved into Salon Employers Association, and basically campaigning for employers in the industry. Anyone that's over the 90 grand threshold, anyone that's employing anybody, we thought they had no voice. That's our honest opinion, and I still believe that. At the end of the day, we thought they had no voice. It didn't matter what they said. They were big, bad, nasty, horrible salon owners, which is the sort of impression that's been put out there. I'm fighting for equality for all of the people that work in my industry, that want to be employed, want to be creative and want to grow. My team deserve the same tax payments as anyone else in any industry. And I'm not pushing one side of the industry against another, because I don't really want to do that. But against the rest of the high street, we pay tens of thousands of pounds more in VAT because of our business model. So we thought, we don't have a voice, and we started out with the Chop the VAT, which evolved into Salon Employers Association, and specifically kept looking at what it's like to be an employer in this industry, and why there's such a massive disincentive to growth. And the biggest subject of all around that is VAT, because we don't claim much of the VAT back. We add all our value through labour, and labour has a huge amount of costs in terms of tax. And basically, if we got a lowering of VAT, despite any sort of thing, it's not going to harm anyone in this industry, but it's going to really, really help those people to provide employment. And I've got literally thousands of people saying the same thing. VAT. It's every single answer is about that, because they just can't survive it. You can't compete against different models in the high street, first and foremost, and you can't also compete against a business model that literally doesn't charge it, or avoids or evades it.
Yeah, but we aren't ring fenced. So if you've got a clothes shop, a phone shop, and a few other retail outlets in your parade, and your rent review comes in, your rent review's going up regardless. So there's no safety escape, because we are getting hit. We don't have any options. Now, a lot of our listening audience wouldn't be VAT registered.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got our barbershop community has a lot of self-employment, a lot of chair rental, a lot of guys that are freelancing and varieties of models. Now, the reason I wanted to get you on and talk about this is that one of the things that's been spoken about a lot, and I've listened to quite a few economists, and we were talking the other week about a legal accountant who was going through it. And lots of noises seem to suggest that the VAT threshold lowering seems like something that's on the Chancellor's list somewhere. Now, if that is the case, that's why I wanted us to have this have this and more of a conversation. Obviously, you're fascinating and interesting in your own right. But I wanted to cover this because although a lot of people listening will think, it's nothing to do with me, I'm not VAT registered, they could be coming. It could be changing.
Yeah.
And the more you understand, the fairer it is. If the threshold is going to drop, we all want to be paying a lower rate at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's the point from your view, that we should be pressuring that the government reduces the VAT on services to 10%.
When the Irish government, when the Irish came together as a group of organisations and proved to the government that their tax burden per pound was so big that it was unsurvivable, and that forced people to avoid paying VAT, stay below thresholds, split their businesses, do anything to stay below. Yeah. And I understand why anyone would do that. I really do.
So this is the bodies of the hair, beauty and barbering industry in Ireland came together.
Yes, yeah, they came together and fought for this about probably 13 years ago now, and they got it down to 9% at one stage and 23. It's now 23 and 13 and a half, I think.
Right. So the higher one is on products bought and sold.
Yeah.
Everything else is on services.
On services, because they realised just how much of a benefit it would be, and it's been a huge benefit. But we need the whole industry to understand it. There are other proposed schemes like tapering and growing and doing whatever, but for me that complicates the system much more and actually perpetuates and accentuates the problem, because all you do is kick the can down the road, and government after government have done that. Now, lowering the VAT threshold is neither here nor there. It would balance the system out. And if the Chancellor chooses to do that, then everywhere else in Europe has done it.
Yeah.
But more importantly, lowering of VAT, even versus other retail businesses, is the simplest, bluntest, sharpest tool.
And in the same way as Ireland, we're talking about this as a hairdressing, barbering, beauty, aesthetics group. Or are you talking about this as services? Are there areas outside of our industry that will come into this? Because this is high wage stuff, isn't it?
I think that the thing that's unique about hairdressing is we're on the high street.
Yeah.
we're business to consumer, and we add nearly all of our value through labour. There's not many other businesses that do that. But what happens in any business to consumer business to business doesn't matter, because if you're buying something off a business and you pay VAT on it, you claim that back, obviously. And you know that, everyone knows that. But the vast majority of our costs are labour, which we can't claim anything back on. If you're a business to consumer business, i.e. you sell to the end consumer, that VAT is really, really important. And for me, other industries that are similar but don't have the same cost as we do are electricians, plumbing, building and trades. Yeah. Now, all of them do exactly the same thing. And what that leads to is them then refusing to take on an apprentice. Yeah. Because the moment you take an apprentice on, you're going to push yourself over that VAT threshold. And that's the only people that can afford to do that are people that PAYE and whatever. And lots of people say, well, I've got an apprentice and I'm under 90. Good for you is all I can say. Amazing, brilliant achievement. But how the you do it? How the fuck do you achieve that?
But I think that's it. I mean, again, from here, we speak to a lot of people who are, we talk about apprenticeships and the industry struggling, certainly barbershops finding it difficult to get barbers. Mm-hmm. I know the hairdressing industry has the same kind of issue. And there aren't apprentices. We're not getting any funding from. All the money goes to the training provider. Yeah. In question marks. Yeah. And we get nothing for that. And on top of that, we're having to employ the apprentice at a rising rate. So it is a really heavy burden. So, but without salons and barbershops that are VATed and are working, that's another avenue that disappears. So there's even less young people coming into the industry.
Yeah, I mean, the survey we did, the hairsurvey.co.uk, is where you can take that and anyone can have their voice. That's the whole point of it. The British Hair Consortium have come together to represent the whole industry with people that have worked in the industry for a very long time, and they all do it voluntarily. I do this because I really care about people in this industry. And going back to that, no, go on.
Sorry, I just want to see, can you just lay out who the consortium is so we know who's recognised? Because
anyone is invited. Any trade body has been invited.
And which trade bodies have kind of sat at the table now?
Hair and Barber Council, Men's Hair Federation, Adam Sloan.
You've been a guest on here.
Yes. The Freelance Hairdressers Association and the Salon Employers Association and the Fellowship for British Hairdressing. Those 5 organisations.
And those 5 are now talking as one voice.
We there are certain things we totally agree on, right? We totally agree that the industry needs help from an apprenticeship's point of view. We totally agree that without a complete reform of tax in our industry, whichever way that may be, to bring equality to hairdressing, not between different business models, although that needs looking at, but between versus other business on the high street, there's just not much point in doing it anymore. You've had guests, I've spoken to a number of your guests, and we all feel the same. What's the point? Great people want to grow great businesses, and then they go, "There's no point."
I mean, it is a problem. I've had lots of conversations on and off camera that essentially the threshold does stifle ambition. You get to a point where you're kind of turning over 85, 86, 87,000. Mm-hmm. And, it's time to lock the door and go on holiday for 3 weeks.
That's what a lot of people do, yeah.
Because it's just too expensive. You go over that 91 and you're immediately, 15, 16,000 pound worse off.
Well, I just used the calculation tool on our latest post. There's a video out there that shows what happens when you go above 89. And I picked some nominal percentages. But basically, the moment you go above, you're 13 grand worse off.
That's such a
13 grand, because there's some you reclaim, obviously.
And the idea of the taper, which I've never understood, and I have genuinely tried, and maybe I'm just too stupid, but maybe it's just really complicatedly put down, and it doesn't seem very straightforward. But presumably the idea of the taper is that you would have a variety of rising VAT amounts for a rising threshold.
Yeah, I mean, each time you go above a certain threshold, you might pay X percentage more. So it might be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, whatever it might be. For me, as I said before, one, we don't need a more complicated system than we've already got. Yeah. But if you're looking at 2 different business models, you're looking at self-employed or freelance trader, whatever it might be, versus a salon owner, then immediately it actually makes the problem worse. It actually makes the division worse. And people say, well, you're only after whatever. I promise you I'm not. There's someone in my salon, right, a young woman who's looking after her kid most of the time, comes in 10 till 3 each day and turns over maybe 36 grand for my salon, right? Immediately she pays 6 grand in VAT or contributes 6 grand in VAT, and there's 30 left to be split, right? Someone else in another salon turning over, 72 grand, they don't pay any VAT, although 12 grand of that should have been contributed. And it isn't well understood. I mean, but our industry don't claim back enough. And so I'm going, why? Because she chooses to have she chooses to work in a salon environment where she's careful, looked after, all the rest of it. Does that person have to forego that much of an income? And I just think it's completely wrong. It won't make a huge amount of difference to me. I could sit here and fight all day long. If I really wanted to, I could just go off, run my business, put my prices up and get on with it.
You've been running at this brick wall for 4 years straight.
Yeah, 4 years.
And so, I'm sure you've been doing it where other people have been doing it too.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's many frustrated people out there. But why do you think the government isn't listening to our industry? We've got issues with apprenticeships, we've got issues with taxation, we've got issue with funding for training, and renowned across the whole industry, legislation to make us registered and all these things that have genuinely over the years go up before government have never seemed to be treated with any level of credence or credibility. That we're left as an industry that does contribute millions and millions. I said billions previously and somebody got upset, but I wouldn't be surprised if it were not far off that. But we
definitely put billions in.
We put a huge amount of money into the system.
There's hundreds of millions in VAT, just in VAT.
Just in VAT. So there's a huge contribution from us. But we're still not taken seriously as an industry. We're still seen as something for the dumb kids to do, something for people with no other skill base. It still has all these stigmas to it. Whereas I've been here a long time. We have so many bodies, so many people that are talking about us, and we're getting less. And I don't understand why we can have so many voices and no one's listening.
I'll tell you how it works. We managed to get ourselves into the Department for Business conversations with the minister. I was the most vocal person in the room. I got very, very upset about this subject on countless occasions. Most people in the room don't have a vested interest in that because a lot of them are talking about retail. A lot of them are talking about export and beauty and VAT. I want there to be a specific thing about services. What I would say right now is that the last government understood the problem and chose to do nothing about it because it wouldn't win them any votes.
Yeah.
Right? We have a 6-month window of opportunity for us to come together, for salon owners to stand up. Anyone that's paying VAT hates it because it is so unfair for our industry. Where we stand up and we insist that the people that are speaking for us speak with our voice. And at the moment, we've got we've got those organisations, but we've also got 2 other organisations that refuse to answer my emails. You know that because I've forwarded things to you where I've got responses.
But your organisation and the consortium aren't a lobbying body.
We are becoming a lobbying body with the Hair and Barber Council and others. I have been in lobbying with the Department for Business. I asked a very polite question about a response that the minister had made, and this is the Conservative minister, and I chased that up very politely. And you've seen my emails; they're pretty polite. And I got kicked out of the group the next day. I got kicked out. So we got silenced in that respect. I'm very frustrated that they won't answer. I want people to know that they refuse to join in the conversation, and that's the bit that I think we hide back from a little bit. These people are paid a lot of money.
And these are being funded by
members, and British Beauty Council is funded by L'Oreal and manufacturers.
Yes, the manufacturers do, isn't it? That's where all the main money's coming from.
And the reason, well, that's for British Beauty Council. They don't have any members. They have an advisory board. I promise you, 2 or 3 people turn up at that every 6 months, and that's what they decide their policy on. We now have the Hair and Barber Council in there. We've got 2 other industry organisations who, if you don't think that tax in our industry is the single most important subject, then you're on a fucking different planet. It's as simple as that, right? Because every single hair professional, every single hair salon owner, tax is the biggest issue for all of us in terms of survivability. A creative industry of brilliant people who give incredible, make people feel amazing, who are treated like shit because they've chosen to go into hairdressing or beauty or whatever. And that frustrates me like you wouldn't believe. But because there isn't that passion and fire, and because they're not pushing that agenda at the very top of the game, we don't get the cut through. We've got a great opportunity now with new ministers and all the rest of it. If the Labour government don't listen to us now on tax, and we don't stand up and say this, what's going to happen is that national minimum wage and so on and so on and so on will just carry on unabated without them understanding the tax implications. And you and me and tens of thousands of others will go out of business.
The argument is, from the government's point of view, is put your prices up, essentially.
You can't do that if the playing field is
I
so
understand that.
unlevel.
But from the government's point of view, if we're doing that, if we're doing national living wage or national, if we're doing anything that's governed and that keeps going up and up and up, which I'm not against. I think it's fair play. People need to be paid, and people shouldn't be taken advantage of, and all that kind of stuff. But their argument is, if you're going to pay this, if you're going to pay a larger wage, just put your prices up.
And my
which
argument
will push more and more and more back.
Of course, but it would also. But my argument is quite simple: actually enforce or do something about the people who aren't doing things properly, which we I mean, there are thousands, and I don't want to get into a massive debate about employment versus self-employment. If you don't have a level playing field, that can't happen. And then we just go to a individual self-employed model across the board. I don't always want to get drawn into that, because what I want to highlight is just how different taxes with us versus other high street businesses, and we've said that a lot of times already.
And this is other businesses that are VAT registered but are selling different.
Well, they sell. If you sell trainers and you buy them in for 50 quid plus VAT, and you sell them for the 60% cost, 50 quid plus VAT is 60 quid, and you sell them for 100 quid, you're gonna claim back more than half the VAT. Yeah. And so therefore you're really adding 10% of the VAT.
Most businesses are paying round about 8 to 11% VAT.
I would guess that's probably about right. They collect 8 to 11% of VAT, because paying is a different thing. We see it as paying because we include VAT in our price. Yeah. So 120 quid in one salon, 20 quid goes out in VAT. And yes, you do claim some back.
But as salons and barbershops, my reclaim is very rarely under 16%.
Yeah, that's probably about right. And there is a flat rate VAT scheme as well. But when I was calculating, I calculated at 14.5%. That 13 grand is 14.5%. That's probably me being very fair.
Yeah.
And if we're paying 2.5 times or collecting 2.5 times more in additional VAT, we can't compete. It's really hard to get the thing across, but because I'm constantly told that I'm against self-employment or I'm against this. If I honestly believed it was completely legitimate and legal and it would pay my people more, I'd do it tomorrow. I don't.
The issue is, I do think the resounding issue is, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation, is that we have got a new government. Mm-hmm. We have got a very efficient chancellor.
Yep.
Who's very rated by economists. Mm-hmm. And some of her already advisors that are on her staff have already talked about lowering the VAT threshold. Mm-hmm. And other economists that they will be listening to all advocate a lowering the VAT threshold.
Yeah.
To allow for the ambition for the companies to be able to grow. Now, if that happens, what we have is a huge explosion of companies that are paying VAT all of a sudden. And this is our opportunity for all of us, whether we are or not, but all of us to come together to start reducing what that VAT amount will be.
Yeah, and I tell you what, you don't want to mess with the VAT man either. At the end of the day, if they do lower the threshold, look, I'm not here to say whether they should or other. No. I'm saying we have to lower VAT to balance the tax playing field for our industry. And that is across the board, whether it's another industry or another. If they do, then people are going to have a big shock on their hands. There's an awful lot of money to find. And it's going to throw fireworks into the thing. Look, I'm not saying whether we shouldn't or not, but I do think that if suddenly you effectively you took 20% off your turnover, you'd be in for a bit of a shock. And as I say, the VAT man will know how the industry works and how things work across the board. I think we could do this all day, but we could.
So, first of all, I guess the main part is what we want is as many people as possible to go look at your Instagram.
Yeah, Salon Employers Association Instagram is specifically for people who employ apprentices and whatever. There are 5 organisations as part of the British Hairdressing Consortium.
And all of this is across all... So MFed, I guess, is one that most of us...
MFed are certainly feeding into the conversation. We all know the problems across the industry. We're all looking for a solution that gives people a chance to grow their business and be respected in our industry rather than scrabble around and fight and lower prices and do all those things. MHFed, Freelance Hairdressers Association, and the Hair and Barber Council. So there's 4 different organisations. I'd welcome the other organisations in, but we want a consensus across the board. We know that apprenticeships are a huge issue, and we know that tax reform will solve those issues for our industry. You can also go to the hair survey and have your say. I've got about 50 or 60 pages of people's responses, personal responses, which I will make sure that land up in a minister's hands. In fact, the advisors to Rachel Reeves, who you're referring to, the Chancellor, and other ministers have already had all this information and continue to do so. We've met with the Low Pay Commission, and then there's some stuff coming out about the Low Pay Commission as well, because we want to make sure that it's really well understood that a year 2 apprentice is simply unaffordable, or will be very, very soon if they change the rules, and they need to really think about that, because our industry actually educates the apprentice rather than earns any money out of them. We're doing that. And yeah, this is our opportunity. Just get involved, because you may suddenly find yourself with a 10 grand bill you didn't know you were going to have. And that's the point. Have your say, have your piece. If VAT was 10% on hairdressing services, there would be more than a 10% increase in most people's salaries. Those people would have more spending power, we'd draw more people in the industry, we'd be able to afford to train more people, and that 10% increase in salaries would also be paying a huge amount back in tax.
Yeah.
So an awful lot of this pays for itself, and helps to grow the industry. And then we can have more respect for ourselves. I think we should be registered. I think we should, like the Corgi register, gas fitters and plumbers and all the rest of it were treated in a similar way. Now you can't get a plumber or electrician for less than 250 quid a day, because as soon as you put that quality stamp on it, you can raise your prices and you are seen as a professional. I honestly think that hairdressers, barbers, beauticians, people that work in this industry care about people so much. And yet no one really looks out for them. And that's what really frustrates me.
I think that's really true. Not wishing to finish on such a miserable note, but check out the Insta. I'm sure we've got more conversation to have, Toby, but thank you so much for that. That was beautiful. Thank you very much. Welcome to the Noble Barber Podcast. We're always looking for interesting people and interesting stories. If you know someone, or you are someone with a great story that you want to share, get in touch and come and join me on the sofa. Thanks very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next time.